Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Annie doll. This one actually came from a Reddit user who has since deleted their account. Now I hope it has nothing to do with sharing this story. They said, I had an experience when I was a kid. I would sleep over at my babysitter's house all the time. Her daughter was a few years older than me and we got along great, so I would sleep in the same bed with her. She had an enormous collection of stuffed animals and dolls. One day we heard her dog barking aggressively at one of her dolls. What made it creepier was that it was a Raggedy Ann doll. We told her parents and they didn't listen, and if the doll was in the room we couldn't sleep, so her dad placed it on the kitchen counter. We woke up to him cursing up a storm. We ran out and could hear the dog and the doll growling at each other. Her dad got dressed, grabbed the doll and supposedly dropped it off at a dumpster a few miles away. I'll never forget the noise that was coming out of that doll. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Furby. Now I'm sure a lot of you guys will know what a Furby is. Let's get one of them up on the screen right now, just in case you don't. Okay, good. We all have a mental image of a Furby now. Now let's get into this story from Reddit user GRZMNKY. A friend bought me a Furby once as a joke while we were stationed in Germany. The one she got me was red and black and evil looking. Well, fast forward a couple of weeks after losing interest in the thing, I'm sleeping and suddenly hear this demonic gravelly voice come from my bookshelf. Not the sound of batteries running out, but a seriously demonic voice. I jump up and turn on the lights and search for the sound. I hear it coming from the top shelf, and when I look, nothing is there. Suddenly, I hear the voice behind me and the little bastard is sitting on top of my wall locker just repeating this sound. Then it says, "Hello son, I missed you." I immediately took it out to the burn pit and cleansed it with fire. It screamed as it burned and I can still hear those screams 10 years later. Yeah, I wasn't messing around with this video, guys. Coming in at number 8 now, we have Amazing Amy. This one also came from a Reddit user who has since deleted their account. I'm starting to sense a bit of a trend here. They said, I had a toy that was dangerous to my mental health. It was called Amazing Amy and was interactive and came with a bunch of accessories. It would say things like, "Mommy, me want peas," and you were supposed to take the spoon for the peas that had a little sensor in it and put it in her mouth. Now unfortunately, the sensors in mine didn't work properly, so I would feed it the peas and it would say something like, "Me no want cookie, me want peas," and would get progressively angrier the more you got it wrong. My dad walked in on me crying one day while slamming the pea spoon into my doll's face with all the force my tiny arms were capable of. He decided he'd had enough. Because I was attached to it for some warped, perverted reason, he just took out the batteries, but it didn't stop working. Okay, it's that last line that got me. Toys with batteries can be as creepy as they want, but when I pull out the batteries and they're still being creepy, nah, I'm out. Moving on to number 7 now, we have Greeder and Cedar. This one comes from user Without Within, and it has an interesting twist. They said, when my brother and I were little, we had 2 clown dolls that were named Greeder and Cedar. When I say we were little, I mean very young, as in pre-kindergarten young, so there's not a whole lot of detail I can now remember about these dolls. If I had to describe them, I would say that it looked like homemade knockoffs of Raggedy Ann and Andy. One was a boy, the other was a girl. One doll had yellow yarn hair, one was in overalls, very late 70s, early 80s style. When I asked my brother about them, he also remembered Greeder and Cedar. Here's the thing, all the grown-ups in my family who've been asked, my parents, aunts and uncles swear that my brother and I never owned clown rag dolls. However, we've been told that Greeder and Cedar were the names of our imaginary friends. Okay, so were they imaginary friends or were they real? I don't even know which is more creepy at this point. Coming at number 6 now, we have 6. This one came from Reddit user Wonderstrum. They said, this happened to me once while I was painting. I was alone in the house when a toy in one of the far rooms came on and started playing this creepy music really slowly and out of tune, like it was half broken. I thought it was really weird, and I had this app on my phone that supposedly used radio frequencies to talk to spirits. So I opened the app and asked, is anybody there? Half joking. It came through kinda muddied, but I heard a voice on the other end say yes. A bit nervous at this point, and then I asked, how old are you? And it responded 6. clear as day in a little girl's voice. I couldn't finish that job fast enough. Moving on to number 5 now, we have 2 mice. This one comes from Reddit user Nyongatree. It didn't get much attention in the thread that it was posted in, which is a shame, so I thought I'd share it on here. They said, when I was younger, about 10 to 12 years old, I remember my mom had 2 Minnie and Mickey Mouse dolls. They were as tall as a 5-year-old child, so for a toy they were quite big. A friend of my grandma gave them to my mom, and then she gave them to me. I used to play and sleep with them, but at a time I started noticing weird stuff happening with the toys. One day I left Mickey in the bed and Minnie in the living room, so I went to the kitchen because my mom was talking to me. When I came back, Mickey was close to the door of the bedroom, like if he was trying to get out of there. It happened a few times in different parts of the house. The toys were always moving from one part to another. I asked my mom if she could have moved them, but she said no. Now, we've done a lot of creepy stories about Disney things being creepy. Just when I thought we'd run out of them, this happens. I think they were trying to get to each other, which is terrifying. Next up at number 4 now, we have Mama. This one comes from Reddit user Sapuff42, and all I can say is, if you've got a problem with creepy dolls, well, maybe don't watch this one, I don't know. They said, my cousin's grandmother had Parkinson's and lived with my cousin, so we grew up knowing her and treating her like she was our own grandmother. She got it into her head at some point that I loved porcelain dolls and would get me one for every occasion, birthdays, Christmas, Easter, etc. My dad built a shelf in my bedroom for them so they could be up and out of the way, which is still nice. One year she got me a musical one. It played Fur Elise when you wound the crank in its back. After a few weeks it started playing it at night when I went to bed. Strangely enough, this creeped me out and I moved that one from the shelf into the closet. The next couple of nights I heard Mama, Mama, Mama from the closet. That doll was promptly moved to the basement, and when we moved, it stayed in the basement forever. It's probably still there, isn't it? Next up at number 3 now, we have the eyes. This is a short one by Reddit user Time Travel. They said, I had a stuffed animal's eyes move once. I was looking at it while my mom read me a bedtime story one night. I was holding the stuffed dog and looked in its eyes, and the pupils moved like it was looking down. I never could look at this dog again. I have many stories in that house. I've thought about writing an entire post, but it's a long one. Yeah, I'd like to hear that. That was a short one, but I don't know, it just got to me. Anything with a toy watching you and moving its eyes, nah, I'm out. Moving on to number 2 now, we have Suffocation. This one comes from Reddit user Jadazelvest. They said, I used to collect porcelain dolls as a kid, not because I liked them, but my family kind of forced them on me, so I guess I thought I had to like them. What good to a child is a doll they can't play with? Anyway, I never had a problem with them since they were a norm for me, until one night I had a terrible nightmare. One of my dolls, the one that sat on my nightstand next to my bed, it watched me while I slept, creepy, no, had crept into my dreams and had glowing red eyes and told me it was going to eat my mom and my stepdad and then use a plastic bag to suffocate me. What? It told you it was going to eat your mom, then your stepdad, and then use a plastic bag to suffocate you. That wouldn't just make me scared of dolls for life. I'd be scared of plastic bags. I'd just get a bag for life instead. For life. It's a joke for all of our British viewers. All 10 of you. And finally, number 1 now, we have Caramel. This one came from Reddit user Fublar. They said, this happened a couple of years ago. I was staying at my fiance's place one night and she has a 6-year-old son whose room was right next to hers. I got up at about 1 AM to go and take a leak. On my way back, I hear her son crying in his room. He has this stuffed cat from Build-A-Bear that he adores. It was his first ever Build-A-Bear that he got when he was about 2 or 3 years old. Its name is Caramel and it has one of those voice boxes that plays a meowing sound. So I go into his room and ask him what's wrong. Why is he crying? He said that one of the cats scratched Caramel as they were jumping off his bed and that he was hurt. I picked up his toy and looked it over and seen nothing. I asked him where Caramel got hurt and he indicated to one of the toy's paws. I gave it a kiss and said that it's all better. He turned to me, tears in his eyes, and said that he wasn't and that Caramel was dead. I asked him why he would say that, and he responded that Caramel wasn't talking. Thinking that he thought the voice box was somehow damaged, I activate it, and after it's done meowing, I told him, look, everything is fine, and that Caramel still talked. He looked up at me, and in a matter-of-fact voice said that that's the voice box, not Caramel's voice. Starting off at number 10 now, we have The Nightmare. This one came from Reddit user MD39. She said, my mother had a collection of dolls when she was a child, but had a very abusive stepfather who burned all but one. I have the one that she salvaged. I called her Amy, and I've always felt positive vibes from her. I guess my grandmother and aunt noticed how proudly I displayed Amy and started buying me expensive dolls for my own collection. One doll in particular gave me a very strange feeling of being watched. I had named her Catherine. She was taller than the other dolls, and I always swore that she had moved slightly every so often. Never enough to cause alarm, but enough to where I would realize something was off. She was on the end of my display, being the tallest, and Amy was at the other end since she did not have a doll stand and had to sit. One night I had a nightmare about Catherine trying to kill Amy. When I came home from school that afternoon, Catherine was turned facing Amy's direction and Amy was slumped over instead of sitting up. Needless to say, Amy was moved off the display and took up a new residence with my American Girl doll, the only doll I actually played with. Amy was a permanent fixture on the chassis lounge my neighbours had given me for the AG doll. After that, the weird feeling Catherine gave me went away. Next up at number 9 now, we have Purple Smoke. I love this one. It sounds like it's straight out of a horror book of short stories. It came from Reddit user NSA Sees You, and they said, when I was a kid I used to live with my grandparents. I have an uncle and an aunt who is just 4 to 5 years older than me, and we would be home alone after school. One time my grandparents were out a little longer, we were watching TV in the living room, and out of nowhere we had a little kid talking in one of the guest rooms. Back then one of the rooms was never used, so we used to play in there. The only toy that was in the guest room was my aunt's doll, and I can remember the voice clearly asking us to go in there to play with it. My grandpa burned the doll that night at the beach. It was weird how the smoke was purple when he burned it. Coming out number 8 now, we have the Transformers. This one came from a Reddit user who has since deleted their account, which I always find a little bit suspicious, but let's jump in anyway. They said McDonald's used to do a toy with their Happy Meals which was a Transformer type thing. It glowed and made noises when you pushed a button. Well, somehow turning on my light would trigger this and it would make all this racket, which wasn't really a big deal because it was pretty quiet and not that obnoxious, until the batteries started dying. A few months later I turned on the light in my room and all of a sudden I hear "Rah!" I have never run so fast out of my room. I refused to go in there for days because I was convinced something in there wanted to kill me. I'd totally forgotten about the toy, so eventually my parents went to investigate and found it hanging in a storage basket. That went as far away from the house as is physically possible. Moving on to the number 7 spot now guys, we have Sweet Child. This one came from a Reddit user called Intrigued who reminds us why some things really should just be for Christmas. They said when I was like 7 to 8 my dad gave me a Madame Alexander doll which started my love of beautiful porcelain dolls. My mom's boyfriend learned this and got me a cheap porcelain doll for Christmas. It had one of those wind up things on the back and would play Sweet Child of Mine. I liked it at first until in the middle of the night it would just start playing by itself. It moved to the very back of my closet after that, and then I left it there where I took my sister's room when she moved out. My brother, who inherited the old room, said he found the doll because he would hear it playing in the middle of the night too. Next up at number 6 now, we have Waving Hello. This one came from Reddit user Squatch. It's quite long, so I'm going to jump into it right now. They said, when I was a kid, I slept in a room with my older brother, while my older sister slept in another room with my youngest brother. Our rooms were quite small though, so to create more space, we took the doors off the closets and put dressers and stuff in them. In my sister's bedroom, she had rows of stuffed animals on the top shelf of her closet. One of the stuffed animals that was up there was actually a weird looking bear that was coloured red and white, with an oversized head and a small body. This particular stuffed animal was given to us by our aunt, who had a child years earlier that when born had an oversized head due to an excess of water on its brain. This poor child died soon after birth, and she gave us the stuffed animals that he had. I assume she got this particular one for her child because it reminded her of him. My siblings siblings thought it was ugly when it was given to us, but I thought it was unique and sort of cute. Despite it sort of being mine, it somehow ended up in my sister's room. My sister and my youngest brother slept in a bunk bed. Now she slept on the top bunk while my brother slept on the bottom. Because my brother was afraid of the dark, they slept with the lights on. From where they were in their beds, they had a clear view of the closet. One night, my sister suddenly awoke to see the stuffed bear moving one of its arms back and forth, which looked like it was waving hello. She immediately got freaked out and started trying to wake up my younger brother by calling his name. As she was calling his name to wake him up, the stuffed bear stopped waving, and suddenly it and other stuffed animals started slowly moving their heads from side to side, which looked like they were saying no and urging her to not wake him up. At this point, my brother woke up and saw the stuffed animals shaking their heads. They then ran out of the room screaming, which woke up our whole house and made my dad throw out the stuffed animals that were guilty of freaking them out. I don't know if there was a spirit attached to the stuffed bear, or if the bear was tied to so much emotion and energy and was just a kind of magnet for entities, but I was sad to see it go, despite the scary story. Next up at number 5 now, we have the static. This one comes from Reddit user LW0156. They started off their own thread where they asked people to share their haunted doll experiences. They went first and said, "A couple years ago I was looking at haunted dolls on eBay, not taking it too seriously. I decided to place a bid on one. The next day, weird things started happening around the house. The electrical panel in the basement opened by itself. The lights would turn on and off, and not just flickering. The light in one room would turn off for several minutes and then would turn back on again. Doors would slam shut. My cat kept growling and looking beside me. I went to work and told one of my co-workers about the strange occurrences happening at my place. All of a sudden, the lamp flickered on and off like crazy, and the radio in my room turned on and off and made this loud static noise. I have never been so terrified in my life. I contacted the owner of the doll and begged her to cancel my bid as soon as I got home from work. Who knows what would have happened if the doll actually arrived." Coming in at number 4 now, we have Inherited. This one comes from a Reddit user whose story hits all the right themes of old people, death, and just plain creepy. They said, "You know those cheap plastic dolls that you can get at craft stores that you can knit or crochet elaborate dresses for, popular with grannies? My mom received one of these dolls with a purple and white dress from an elderly neighbor lady not long before the lady passed away. My mom had a blue armchair in her bedroom and had the doll sitting on it. She always kept the door open. Every time I would pass her room, the doll would turn its head to look at me. My nephew, who is not much younger than me, experienced the same thing. I had nightmares about that doll. I just hated it. Eventually, my mom gave it away and I was beyond relieved." Moving on to number 3 now, we have Arms Outstretched. This one comes from Reddit user Tequila Bat. They said, "When I was growing up, my house was always uncomfortable. There was something off about it, and I had a lot of unexplainable experiences living there. As time went on and I got older, I started to put away my toys, but one stayed until almost the end. A Vermont teddy bear my mom had given me when I was very small. These are expensive bears. The average price is around $60, with basic joints so the limbs and the head can swivel. I loved it more than any other toy, and so I can only explain what happened as my house turning it against me. At first, it was the feeling of being watched by it. However, I always had the feeling of being watched in that house, and so I ignored it. Next came the distinct feeling it was in a different position when I came back to it. Not the other end of the room, but maybe its head was pointing a different way, or it was on the wrong side of my bed. Then one night, as I was lying in bed, the bear was laying next to me flat on its back. I heard a noise in the hallway and sat up. When I turned around, the bear was sitting up next to me with its head turned and its arms outstretched, like it was trying to grab me. I fell out of bed, trying to get some distance between me and the bear. The next day, I packed up any toy with a face left in my room and put it in the crawl space. But, being sentimental, I put the bear up on a shelf, firmly wedged between books and other keepsakes. It never moved again, but that didn't stop the house from finding new toys to make us unwelcome in our own home. Next up at number 2 now, we have the Furby swarm. Now if you remember, in the last video we talked about Furbies, and in case you've forgotten or you just don't know what a Furby looks like, here's a picture for you. Yeah, they look creepy at the best of times, but Reddit user Derpahoo told a story that makes them even worse. They said, "I've been waiting my whole life for this. In elementary school, I was invited to sleep over at my friend Sally's for her birthday. There were quite a few girls going. We were told everyone was going to sleep in the family room, and somehow I scored the couch. Now, Sally loves Furbies, and above the couch was a shelf dedicated to them. There was a lot of Furbies in different shapes, sizes, and colors on that shelf. So the party is okay, everyone gets ready for bed, and I get comfortable on the couch. Now fast forward a few hours, everyone is dead asleep. I myself am in a nice deep sleep, when suddenly the shelf breaks, the wooden part falling behind the couch, while the Furbies rain down on my sleeping form. Activated by whatever activated Furbies, movement or sound or whatever, they come alive. I am awoken by a horde of Furbies all over me, talking and moving and looking at me. I eventually recovered from that night, but I had nightmares for years." And finally, number 1 now, we have Noah. This came from another Reddit user who deleted their account, but I'm just going to jump into it anyway. They said, "When I was a little kid, I used to sleep with a bed full of soft toys. I had my large bears and Noah, the awesome polar bear that has never left my side since I got him. I fell asleep after a few hours of being trapped in my room, but something woke me up after my mom had gone to bed. It was very early in the morning, 1 to 2 a.m, and I could hear something. I stayed very still and listened. Then I felt it. One of my soft toys climbed over me and slid off the side of the bed and onto the floor with a thud. I tried to catch it moving, but it was just standing next to my bed. It was a floppy toy bear, so it couldn't stand on its own. I grabbed it and asked what it was doing. It didn't say anything or move. I dumped it back on the bed and fell back to sleep after a while. I made sure all the dolls and soft toys apart from Noah left my room after that. I've tried to rationalize it since then. I was still pretty young when it happened, under 10, but I remember it so clearly. I was not dreaming. I know I wasn't. I had a rabbit, but it wasn't her. She slept in her hutch outside in the summer, and nothing had gotten into the house. She also didn't move like I had felt either. I don't know what else it could have been. This happened before I saw the black hooded thing standing next to my bed one morning, but after something had woken me up, scratching my leg in the night. Whatever that was bolted when it realized I was awake. It was small. I thought it was my dead guinea pig, that he was upset with me because he died, but now I'm not so sure."
Alright, coming in at number 10, we have the Demon Nemo. This story was posted on Reddit along with some video evidence of the ghoul. This story didn't get much traction as it was posted on a little known subreddit, but I wanted to bring it to the floor. This is what Not So Evil Corp had to say. "So this is my toy Nemo. He's 15 to 16 years old. Throughout his life he has been a toy for our dogs, but he spent around 6 months left in a ditch and even longer left outside in all weathers." Cold Nemo. "One day my granddad had enough and threw him out over a fence. Only to take him back because Nemo said, 'Can I have a hug?' when he hit the floor. Seems like a cute coincidence, but just wait." Now you may think that Nemo only looks and sounds demonic, but there is more. After around 4 years, Nemo started talking on his own. A few times I've heard him in the early hours of the morning while I'm in bed. After 10 years, he started saying new phrases that I didn't remember. He started correctly responding to how we move him. When we moved him up, he would say swim up, and when we moved him down, he would say swim down. He did this without us having to press his fin to make him talk. Literally, he was just moving up and down and he seemed to answer. It's almost like he had been learning. Now on top of that, remembering he'd been left out in the rain, ice, frost and just all weathers, he has never had his batteries changed or been turned off in the past 15 years. This is how he talks now, saying a mix of everything he knows with a creepy mechanical groan before speaking. Either he's been possessed, or Disney have used their magic to make the ultimate battery pack. After all these years, he shows no signs of stopping. Honestly, 15 years, that is pretty terrifying. That would scare me too. Have you ever tried removing the batteries? Maybe that's what you should do. Okay, so you guys seem to like it when I tell you my own scary stories, so maybe this isn't quite as horrifying as some of the others on this list, but just a creepy story that I've observed firsthand. At number 9, we have the story of Selfa the leprechaun. So a few years ago, me and my ex-boyfriend were visiting Ireland. I've only ever been to Ireland twice and I absolutely love it. We went to Cork, Killarney and Dublin on this trip. Now on our last full day on the trip, we decided to do a few tourist things here and there, and we decided to go to the Leprechaun Museum. Now, I don't know if you guys have been, but it's pretty fun. We learned about the history and folklore behind leprechauns and got to climb giant chairs as if we were leprechauns, which really was fun. Anyway, we were laughing and joking in the gift shop and we realised that my ex-boyfriend's brother was visiting from Australia soon and he was gonna bring his daughter, so we decided to buy her a gift. Long story short, we picked out a stuffed leprechaun. I went over to their stand and I picked one that had just fallen on the floor, so in a way, they kind of chose me. Now the little leprechauns all sang and seemed really jolly in their kind of little Irish accents doing their thing. It was cute. Anyway, I packed him in my case and I took him home, and eventually we gave him to Will's niece Emily. Initially, she played with him and was adamant that his name was Selfa, but later we saw that she'd hidden him under a pillow. We asked why, but she said that he kept singing even when she didn't ask him to. Now you have to press a button for that. She also said that he kept looking at her and she didn't like it. We saw her again a week later and joked with her parents about the leprechaun, and it seemed that she wouldn't sleep if he was in the room, but she was still keen for him to come with her to places, but she never wanted to be too close to him. This was probably just a case of kids being kids, but it did freak me out to see how scared she was of him. Coming in at number 8, meet Mandy. So I've tried not to put too many creepy dolls on this list because they're a genre unto themselves, but I did want to mention this absolute menace who loves her pet sheep. Mandy the doll lives in Quasno Museum in British Columbia in Canada. She came to live there after she was donated by her previous owner, who really wanted her gone. Why? Well, because she was constantly awoken by the sounds of a screaming baby at night, which would definitely be enough for me to just get rid. Now she lives in her home at the museum, but it is said that she steals lunches from employees and follows visitors around with her eyes. I don't want to play with Mandy. Do you? Coming into number 7, we have the elf on the shelf. I don't feel great about the elf on the shelf in general because, like, horror. Luckily, the fad of placing an elf around the home in the run up to Christmas as a naughty or nice spy for Santa was absolutely not a thing while I was growing up, but it seems to be a thing for young children now. For me, I don't like it because it's very surveillance-y. I came across this picture and I was just wondering, like, why are we doing this to children? What a horror show. I feel like at Christmas time I'm gonna make a whole list of scary elf on the shelf stories. Consider this your 7-month warning. Now this dude even conducted a seance using an Ouija board and 2 off-shelf elves. Why? Coming in at number 6, we have SpongeBob. Have you ever just got a worrying feeling from an object without really knowing why? Well, Redditor Idol Pyramid was not a fan of their SpongeBob toy, gifted to them when they were 6 years old, at the same time that their father sadly died. At the beginning of the Reddit post, they wrote, "When I first saw the toy, there was something very, very unsettling." They did admit that around that time they did have a general fear of inanimate objects and paintings with eyes, and they would even turn away their mum's pictures of Jesus for fear of him looking. Perhaps they were kind of psychologically going through something with the death of their father. Anyway, with the SpongeBob toy, he talked and said different SpongeBobby phrases. Classic SpongeBob. The story author said, "I would only ever play with this toy when I was around other family members. I didn't like being alone with it, and if I ever was, I would be sure to constantly play with it so there wouldn't be any silence between us." Weird. It seems like one night things went from bad to worse, as the storyteller said that they were watching a VHS in their sister's room, she wasn't there, and they fully believed that the toy turned and said to them, "Look at me," clear as day. They said, "I turned my head to the right where I saw my SpongeBob toy having wide eyes. It was looking up towards me." Now this was instead of the normal shy, embarrassed expression that it once preceded. "I was paralyzed with fear. I made complete eye contact with the toy. My stomach felt nauseous. After about a minute of thinking, I grabbed the toy, I ran out of the room as fast as a 6-year-old could, and I threw it in the hallway closet. I ran into my mum's room horrified. Now I wasn't crying, I wasn't screaming, I was simply stunned with fear. During this time I was in school therapy to discuss my dad's recent death, but after this moment that is all I wanted to talk to my therapist about, at least for a month." They said that the toy remained in the closet until they convinced their mother to burn it. The storyteller is now 19 years old, and they said that they still think about that horrifying SpongeBob toy. Coming into number 5, we have Señorita Sarita. Why do possessed dolls always go on a scratching mission? Okay, this is my second and last possessed doll for this list. The Nunes family from El Calaro in Peru said that the doll is a menace and it had been plaguing them for 7 years by watching them, scratching them, and making strange praying sounds, which really is not for me. The blonde-haired, blue-eyed doll is being hailed as the Peruvian Annabelle and has been generating drama for the family for years. The mother of the family, Yvonne, said that the doll is left in a corner of the room at night, but by morning she has moved of her own accord. Now my main question is like, why have you had this doll for 7 years? If it is such a menace, throw it out. The answer seems to be because Yvonne believes the doll to be an incantation of her dead sister-in-law. Sure. Coming into number 4, we have jarts. Have you ever heard of jarts? If you're my age or younger, then maybe you haven't, but if you're older, then perhaps you will have done. Jarts, or lawn darts, were a popular toy for the whole family from the 1950s to the late 1980s. They were little sharp spears that you could throw around willy-nilly. What could go wrong? Yep, lots could go wrong. Jarts were horrifying. They were responsible for an incredible 7,000 injuries and a number of horrific deaths. In 1987, a 7-year-old girl by the name of Michelle Snow was killed by her brother when he threw a dart that hit her in the head and pierced her skull. The following year, an 11-year-old girl was injured so badly that she fell into a coma and suffered brain injuries as a result of the lawn darts. Now in the 1990s, the United States even called for people who still owned the toys just to turn their weapons in or destroy them, and once again I say the word weapon here because actually that's kind of what they were. Coming into number 3, we have the story of the tiny cat. I found this story on Thought Catalog and it is posed as being a true story. A couple bought a tiny toy cat that reminded them of their own half-Siamese kitty, Cassie. I do it all the time, I always buy black Labrador stuff for my mum. Now the cat made a little cute mewing noise, but eventually the batteries died and the toy cat stood decorative on a shelf. Now around the time that the batteries died, Cassie, the actual cat, grew ill. Eventually around Christmas time, after a long illness, sadly, Cassie the cat did die and her owners decided to bury her in the garden. On their first night without Cassie, they heard a faint meowing. Weirded out, they went to investigate. It was coming from the toy cat that hadn't worked in months. It hadn't even been pressed, so what was going on? Coming into number 2, we have the horrifying story of the telephone. This is a long story posted on Reddit. I'll do my best to paraphrase, but the link to the whole story is in the description box, so I would encourage you to check it out for yourselves. The story was posted by Lost in Space, real name Barry, and received 4.9 thousand upvotes. It was posted on the No Sleep subreddit, and the headline is, "I brought my nephew a toy phone 10 years ago, someone was talking to him through it." Now, it seems that Barry was able to attend his nephew Spencer's birthday party last minute, and the kid was turning 6 and was really into unusual things, preferring something curious from a junk shop or a vintage shop that actually he would enjoy a bit more and use his imagination with rather than a conventional toy. With this in mind, Uncle Barry decided to get Spencer an old vintage phone from the 1960s. Now the woman in the store that he bought it from decided just to give it to him. Spencer seemingly loved it. After 2 weeks though, actually, he'd begun imagining someone else at the end of the line, and according to his dad, he was speaking to someone named Billy. Of course, at first they laughed it off, but Billy was ever present. Things took a turn for the worse as conversations with Billy turned sinister. Billy started telling Spencer things he didn't want to know, and one day, Billy told Spencer his aunt had slipped on a knife, which it turns out she had. Eventually, Spencer started hearing Billy's voice in his head without the phone around. After 10 years, when Spencer turned 16, he mailed the phone back to his uncle saying that Billy instructed him to do it. He wrote a note and said, "At first I thought Billy was good, telling me all the dirty little secrets Mum and Dad kept from me. Billy was only telling me stuff that had to do with serial killers, natural disasters or national tragedies. I realized he was actually bad. I could probably tell you all of the names of every victim on the Titanic. He enjoyed whispering them to me as I fell asleep. Now today feels different. I'm taking control and ending this once and for all. When I started writing this, he taunted me saying I was a coward and I could never go through with it, but after a bit he saw that I was serious. I've already got my belt ready. He says before I do this, he would like for you to be the new owner of the phone." Finally, at number 1, we have what happens when toys meet the SCP Foundation. So, SCP-1048. That's what happens. Hurrah! If you haven't heard of the SCP Foundation, it's a fictitious organization filling the internet with super creeps. We've actually done a lot of videos on it and the characters you can find there, so I would encourage you to check out those videos if you love a good scare. So SCP-1048 is categorically not a nice bear. It seems like one, but it is not. The existence of this bear is the reason that no teddy bears are allowed in the SCP Foundation building. 1048 can move of its own accord, communicate through cutesy gestures, and loves hugs. The bear will often embrace people's legs and draw childlike pictures as gifts. It will even dance and jump. Anything to be liked. But you shouldn't trust this bear. It can replicate itself out of anything. Now, one incident had the bear forming a clone bear out of everybody within a 10-meter radius's ears. Yes, their ears. He cloned himself with ears. Ugh. Here's a drawing for you in case you're wondering what that looked like. Now I know what you're thinking, the SCP Foundation isn't real, but to that I ask, are you sure? Real or not, inspired by SCP-1048, someone actually made a real teddy out of chicken skin, and it is probably one of the more horrifying images you will ever see in your life. Here it is. You're welcome.
At number 10 we have the Haunted Doll Gang. What a better way to kick off this list than not with just one haunted toy, but an entire gang of demonic dolls. The Haunted Doll Gang sounds like a group of French thugs from a strange black and white independent movie, but it's actually a real thing. A paranormal investigator with a passion for collecting things has been putting together a group of haunted dolls. What could go wrong when you bring a bunch of pale-faced toys with spirits attached to them into the same place? I don't know, they'll probably just have a tea party, who cares? Their names are Crystal, Monica, Charlotte, True, Isaac, Lily, Cameron, and Ashley, and their owner has all of them set up with a camera constantly running just in case they do anything spooky. He doesn't want to miss one moment of potential ghost activity. The dolls have been caught on camera moving and talking, doing all sort of creepy stuff, and sometimes you can even hear them giggling, which is the creepiest thing a doll can do. He has a camera set up in his hallway which caught footage of a ghost boy walking around at the bottom of his stairs. Yeah, I wonder what caused that to happen. Maybe the gang of haunted dolls you have in your home? Alright, at number 9 we have the Island of Dolls. Time to go even bigger. Now we've got a whole island of dolls that have a creepy demonic force attached to them. This has to be one of the creepiest places in the whole world. This place used to be just a regular old island just south of Mexico City, but then its owner, Julian Barrera, decided to do a little redecorating. He found a girl's dead body in the river right outside his home. Next to this girl's body was a doll, who he assumed was the girl's doll. He was afraid the girl's spirit was going to be angry and was going to start to haunt him, so he decided to hang the girl's doll from a tree in a way to please her. If it was me, I would have just moved. Well, apparently doing this didn't work because the girl's spirit was still unhappy, so he hung up more dolls, hundreds of them. The scariest part about this story is Barrera was found dead in the same spot that the girl was found. So don't play with a demon's toys unless you want to end up going crazy and decorate an entire island with dolls and then die in the same spot you found the demon ghost body thing that happened, you know what I mean. At number 8 we have the clown doll from Poltergeist. This guy haunted my dreams for like 5 years. I watched Poltergeist when I was 6 and then I was like, oh, clowns and dolls are gonna haunt my nightmares for the rest of time, thanks. In the 1982 classic Poltergeist, a house is built on an Indian burial site, and after a family moves into the house, things keep going downhill. Demons possess everything in the house and start tormenting the family. Throughout the movie we see the family son constantly check in on that creepy clown sitting in his room before he goes to sleep. Every time I see that part of the movie I'm like, just move it out of your room, you already don't like it, why are you leaving it there? Well, the kid doesn't, and then it tries to kill him. The arms grow out like these long ropes and then tries to strangle him to death while you can hear the clown chuckle. Let's watch! At number 7 we have Billy from Dead Silence. For those of you who haven't seen Dead Silence, it's about an evil ventriloquist doll who's attached to some sort of demonic force who is also his owner who is a demon, but they're both dead. It's kind of a convoluted plot, and you think a horror movie about ventriloquist dummies would have done a lot better. I mean, all the pieces are there, but not everything gets to be a smash hit. Even though this movie didn't impress the critics, it has an especially creepy villain. Billy the ventriloquist doll wants to kill you but first make you scream. Once you let out a big howl, he will rip out your tongue and then give your body to his ghost master, who will then turn you into a doll. It sounds like all the worst parts of dying wrapped into one. You get frightened, mutilated, and then your body is used as an art piece for a dying performance art. At number 6 we have Sid's toys from Toy Story. I don't know if you guys are going to agree with me on this one, because the whole point of Sid's toys in Toy Stories was that they looked scary but they were actually kind and had a passion for justice. But I'm going to reach into my own fanfic theory of what happened to those toys that attacked Sid. So the toys revolt, then they turn against Sid and do stuff to him that will probably leave him heavily medicated for the rest of his life. Yeah, they really torment him bad. Now what happens after? Do these toys just sit in the room waiting to be thrown into the trash? Or do they start a revolution? They got a taste for revenge and now they want more. This is the beginning of the toy army rising up against us and ending all of our lives. And we don't know what gives these toys in Toy Story their ability to live. Maybe they get their consciousness from the same thing we do. Or maybe demons could possess them and then use them as little soldiers in their dark army. I know this is a far-fetched idea of demonic possession, but all I'm saying is that there are villains in the Toy Story universe, so who knows, there could be demonic toys too, and if I was one of those toys, I would start killing things as soon as I knew I had the upper hand. At number 5 we have Pimp Doll. I just found out about this while making this list and I had to include it because it's one of the cheesiest things I have ever seen. Pimp Doll is one of the villains from a movie called Blood Dolls. First of all, the plot of this movie is ridiculous. It's about an evil genius who turns people into dolls so they can kill his enemies, and the budget is terrible. All the special effects are horrible. Everyone in the movie is over-sexualized, and the main doll doing all these killings is Pimp Doll. I haven't watched the movie, so I don't know what kind of horrible spirit is inside Pimp Doll, but I do know that he loves killing, so he could be demonic. I just wanted to get him in because it's so ridiculous. You guys need to know about this. In the trailer alone, he kills like 8 dudes. For that reason, I think he fits perfectly on this list. You don't want to play with him because he'll probably just kill you, and he's got some sort of evil soul inside him. See, it's all lining up. So you need to do yourself a favor and watch this trailer. The trailer is so poorly put together. It's so cheesy and so bad. It's from 1999, but it looks like it's from 1971. At number 4 we have Charlie. Okay, if you buy a new home and then you go into the attic, then you look in a trunk and there's a creepy doll in there covered in Bible verses, just burn it. Don't ask any questions. Don't keep it in your home. Just burn the thing like it's the last day of Burning Man, naked and on acid. Enjoy yourself. Well, back in 1968, a family in New York did everything I just described except for the part where they burned the doll. They found Charlie in a trunk and he had papers with Bible verses on him, and they decided to put him in their collection of other dolls. He was a nice little addition to their home. Well, Charlie immediately started to get back on his bullshit. He would move around the house, knock stuff over. Things started to get really spooky when the family's daughter said that Charlie would come into her room at night and talk to her. The parents thought it was nothing, but then they started to take it seriously when she woke up with scratches that had appeared on her body overnight. After that, they took Charlie back to his jail in the attic. Once again, why wouldn't you just burn him? You're leaving him there for the next family to find. That's not a nice thing to do. At number 3 we have Chucky, probably the most famous killer doll of all time. This wouldn't be a list of demonic toys without him. And yes, I know that Chucky doesn't have a demon inside of him per se, but it's the soul of a serial killer that got locked inside a doll through black magic and then goes on a massive killing spree. That's all the pieces of a demonic force. Chucky is of course the star of the 1988 classic Child's Play and has been tormenting people ever since then. He has a kill count of 67 and is definitely part of the Slasher Hall of Fame. I don't know if that's a real thing, but if it was, Chucky would be in there for sure. At number 2 we have Hugo from Dead of Night. Dead of Night is a 1945 classic. Even though it's in black and white, has some dated acting, and is now kind of cheesy, it still manages to send a shiver down my spine. The movie is about a ventriloquist dummy named Hugo and his master Maxwell. Right from the beginning of the movie you get this strange feeling about the dummy. Every time someone's left alone with him I start to feel uncomfortable. As the movie progresses we start to see it come to life and begin to take over Maxwell. Now it's never clarified whether or not Hugo is possessed by some sort of demon or Maxwell is slowly slipping into some sort of psychotic state. It doesn't really matter because at the end of the movie Hugo is the master and Maxwell is the puppet. If you're a fan of classic horror movies then this is one you should not pass up. Alright, for the number 1 spot we have Harold, one of the more famous haunted dolls that have been thrown down the internet in recent years. Harold was sold on eBay back in 2003 by Greg Mishka. He was selling the doll for $300 and it came with a warning. He said he had bought the doll at a thrift store and ever since it came into his life everything had been horrible. He would randomly get extremely sick, one of his pets died, and his financial situation was going downhill. However, this warning did not stop the doll from being sold. Since then the doll has been passed from person to person, everyone trying to get rid of it because it apparently ruins your life. A man who came in contact with the doll shortly died right after from a brain tumor, and one of Harold's previous owners died from falling down the stairs. This doll doesn't pull any punches. The crazy part about this is Greg Mishka, the guy who originally sold the doll, said he made the whole thing up. It was a story he just concocted so he can make a little bit of money off a doll that was worthless. So, is the curse real? Did the curse get fabricated from people thinking it's real? Or is there a demon attached to it? I don't know. This is a demon list of demon stuff, so obviously I think there's a demon on it, right?